This is the concierge, sir.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Concierge Confidential. I'm your host, Brian Ortega, and in today's episode, we're going to be diving into some common misconceptions or rumors or things that are false that are common for people coming to Vegas for the first time. So what it really means is, because I couldn't come up with the actual word for it, is I'm going to answer questions that people might have misconceptions about Las Vegas, or there might be things that people think you can get in Las Vegas but are not actually true. So I'm going to be answering some general things that people think when you come here that you can get, as common occurrence. So they're really fun. They're really fun questions. So hopefully this clears things up for you. And some of them are true, some of them are not, and some of them are nuanced. So I'll go ahead and dive through all of those in today's episode. So it really should be a really fun one. It's very much like general questions about Las Vegas, and I answer them and maybe give you my take on those particular questions. And it might be outdated too. So we're going to be going up through those as we go through the episode. So coming up next on Concierge Confidential. Okay, so funny thing is I didn't write any of these down, but I did think of them as I was sort of doing the prep for this particular podcast. So let's start with the first one. The first one for many people who come to Vegas and are trying to be on a budget. This usually tends to be with trying to be on a budget. Is you land in Las Vegas, you walk out of the doors, and you say, and you probably actually didn't walk out the doors. You're looking at your phone to say, how far is the Strip from the airport? And it's probably going to say it's like a mile or like a mile and a half. And to no one's surprise, it's further than that in actual walking miles, because everybody likes to think that they can walk from the airport to the Strip. Please do not ever do that. We don't want to see you actually walking on the side of the street. The good thing is many people do not do this, but people still do. I've seen people with full, giant suitcases trekking along Tropicana Avenue and the street that it's called Paradise, up and down that road coming from the airport. It's actually quite dangerous because then you really can't pull off and pick up a taxi or an Uber, and it's actually kind of dangerous. And also, if you're here in the middle of summer, you might die. But please, get an Uber, get a Lyft, get a taxi. They do have the bus that does go to and from the airport, which are very simple. The bus lines in Vegas are, for the most part, pretty easy because we have the ones that go down the main tourist corridor. So those are usually pretty straightforward. The taxis do have certain prices, and the Ubers and Lyfts obviously run off of sort of dynamic pricing. So just keep that in mind, that just getting to that type of transportation is the easiest and safest way to do it. If you have a lot of people, I usually recommend that you arrange transportation before you get here. Usually there's a bunch of different limousine companies. You could just type in Las Vegas limousines. Executive limousines is a good one. Presidential limousine is a good one. You'll usually have a couple different options, and they're all kind of around the same price. If you want to do a limousine from the airport, the price is usually going to be more expensive being picked up because they have to stage and they have to pay for that than it is being dropped off. So usually for a 6-person limousine, which is sort of the standard, if you want to stretch, that's usually going to be able to fit 8 to 10 people, sort of. I think it says 11, but that's quite long. But for it's just a regular standard limousine, let's just say there's 4 of you and you want to arrive in style, it's usually around $110, $115, typically all inclusive. So usually when you book transportation, is going to include all of the gratuity as well. You can actually book it without the gratuity, but then you have to worry about actually tipping them, which is up to you. Or what you can do is you can actually still do this, because I haven't done it in a while because I lived here for so long. We still have limousines and SUVs at the airport that you can hire to take you to and from the Strip. Usually for an SUV, it's very similar in pricing to the limousines, but for an SUV, usually an Escalade or a Suburban or something of that nature, a nice version. Those usually go for around $90. So usually it's between like $80 and $95 for like a SUV type. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, just don't walk to the Strip. That's just a terrible thing to do. Don't do it. Man, I thought of one as we were actually talking about that last topic because it's so annoying. But speaking of cars, it came back to me. The number one pet peeve that I have, and please don't do this, because Vegas is a very different city than other places that you've probably visited. For example, if you're in Los Angeles or San Diego or New York, especially New York, you can call an Uber or a Lyft and it will go to your location. It will stop at that stop. Like you're on the side of the street and you call for a taxi or an Uber, it'll come up, it'll pick you up right on the side of the street. We do not do that here. That is not customary on the Las Vegas Strip. So I'm hoping that this reaches those of you that have never been to Vegas or you've done this before and you haven't figured it out yet. But each location on the Strip and downtown, and also on local casinos as well, they all have designated Uber and Lyft pickup points at the hotel. They're clearly marked. They're essentially on the signage when you go into the hotel and inside of like their portiches. Fun fact, Uber and Lyft never have their pickup location at the main entrance. It always has to be somewhere else because that has to do with the taxis. Taxis don't like it, so we have to figure it out. So usually the Uber and Lyft pickups are in very difficult places to find, especially for older hotels because they didn't have Uber or Lyft when they built Caesar's Palace back in the day. So Caesar's Palace, honestly, is one of the most difficult places to get an Uber or a Lyft because they actually have, I think, 2 or 3 pickup locations. They have one in the front of the hotel, which, like, unless you're standing at, like, in front of the hotel, they won't pick you up there because it'll redirect you to the pickup location out front of Caesar's Palace, the Coliseum, which is like around a sneaky corner, like it's next to the Coliseum, but it's not like clearly marked. It's very difficult to find. And they also have one in the Forum Shop. So honestly, Caesar's Palace is one of the most difficult places to get an Uber or a Lyft. I've walked around the entire building to try to find it. But it is honestly one of the most annoying things for me is when I'm driving on the Strip and you see people like trying to wave down an Uber or a Lyft. It's actually very, very dangerous. Probably one of the most dangerous things that I see, other than people walking across the Strip when there's a perfectly good bridge that you can cross on because we built it for you. But especially like if you're in front of like the Aria or Cosmo, those are built specifically so nobody picks up on the side of Las Vegas Boulevard. So just know, like if you're inside of the Aria Hotel, you're going to click and you want to get picked up, at that location, you're going to click, where you're going to go, and it will almost automatically click to the closest Uber and Lyft pickup point, which for Aria, I believe there are 2. There's one like on the side of the hotel and one in the front of the hotel, the main entrance. It's just off of like the main entrance. So that one's quite nice. So that's where you go. All the Uber and Lyfts will pick up there. They will not get lost, I promise, because they have GPS as well that tell them to pick them up there. The one that always saw this and it was always super annoying, but I get it. Like you're visiting, you're tourists, you don't know, but now you do. At Circa, which is downtown, their Uber and Lyft pickup is not at the front entrance. It's going to be in the Garage Mahal. And everybody always stands on the side of the street for some reason. Go into the Garage Mahal on the ground floor, and you'll see where the pickup area is. So just do it. Also, don't get out of the Uber or Lyft like on Las Vegas Boulevard. It's just super dangerous. I know you're trying to get to like your location, but please don't do it. So annoying. So let's go to another one that's going to probably help you guys out. So a lot of times, most of you who've come to Las Vegas or you're coming to Las Vegas, it'll say check-in is at 3 p.m. So everybody gets there at 3. I have a little tip for everybody if you've never been here. Like you think it's a very rigid thing. You can show up early and try to get into your room earlier. Be cool about it. Like, don't be pushy. But, you know, you can get there. It happens all the time. We get here and you go in around 11 a.m., 10, 11 a.m., noon, and you don't have to pay anything extra. But you can walk up. Usually it's not as busy, especially if it's not Sunday. Sundays, it is a nightmare. But because that's when everybody checks out. But if you go like on a Friday or a Thursday or even a Saturday, early in the morning, like, 10, 11 o'clock is when let's just say you got in at like 9 a.m. Go to the front desk, say if you can check in. And if it's not a busy day, they might have your room available, your room type available, where you can check in early or no one was staying in it. Again, you have to be, understanding because most of the time these hotels are operating at about 90% occupancy rate, depending on the hotel you're at. And they have to clean the room. That's why you have to check in at 3 or 4 o'clock sometimes, because your room is probably not clean, the one that you specifically wanted. So keep that in mind. But that's a good way for you to, one, get your... that's a good way to check in, so you don't have to wait in the super long line usually. And then you can usually get like your room assignment. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I can't guarantee that one. You usually, if you are not able to actually get into your room at that point, because it's not ready yet, you can, at that point, check in, so you don't have to do that whole situation with the credit cards and all the other good stuff. And then when you have to come back, they'll text you that your room is ready, and then you can go to the express line and then just get your keys that way. Hopefully that works, because sometimes those key machines don't always work. But if you go to a newer hotels, which I don't always trust these, so this isn't always like recommended, but if you go to like a newer hotel, they will actually send your keys to your phone if you have like an app, essentially. So then you're able to use that key to get into your room because it'll just scan. I don't always trust that one, so like I don't want you guys to like run off with that version. But that is something you're able to do with like a lot of Marriott stuff. Sometimes you're able to do that, but not sure if it's like gained all the way into Las Vegas culture. But also you're able to go through, instead of the check-in line, you'll go through like a separate line that's like checkout or something. If you have any questions during your stay and it's a really long line for the check-in line, go through, if they have a checkout line, go to that one, and they're usually able to assist you. This is another thing that you guys should understand. Most places, most hotels on the Strip, who still have concierge desks, they do not usually allow concierge to print room keys. So for those of you that are like, oh my God, it's such a long line at the front desk, I can go to the concierge and I can get my room key printed there. They don't usually have the machines to be able to print out your key. It's a way for us to sort of like police that, and also it's not our responsibility. And you have to go to the front desk to do it anyways, and all that other good stuff. And when you do come get your key, make sure that you bring your photo ID and make sure you're the name on the room. That's why it's important if you come as a couple, and let's just say that, whoever booked the room, let's just say Miss Smith or Jane Smith booked the room. When you check in, make sure your husband's around or close by so that they can add him to the room, which, yes, they do need his photo ID and him there for you to do that. So then if there's any issues, he can also go down there and is able to print a room key and so on and so forth. So you don't always have to do it. We're very strict for the most part of printing out room keys because it's safety. It's like your house, and we don't want to be giving keys to any random person. So like, oh, but like my husband, it's fine. We have the same last name. No, like we really need to see a photo ID because we're trying to keep this place safe. That's the way that it works. Another thing, that was a common question that people ask is like, can I go to the concierge desk to print my room key? No, that's actually one of the main things we're not able to do is print room keys. It's like the number one thing like people ask us for, and we just like can't do it, which I was so happy to be like, front desk, do that. But yeah, so keys. So moving on to the next thing is, like if I go to a show, this is kind of a fun one. If I go to a show and I book tickets, am I able to tip the usher to get a better seat? If you've seen the scene in Vegas Vacation where Clark Griswold walks up to the Wayne Newton show where they got free tickets from Wayne Newton himself, and he says, "Hey, make the seats good." Which is funny because that was actually filmed inside of the David Copperfield Theater, if not Mirage, but it looks like the David Copperfield Theater from the looks of it, and the booths and the whole setup. And he says, "No gratuity is necessary, sir." Back in the day, you were able to do that because usually the tickets were, issued and you can move stuff around. Ushers sort of had that ability. You really can't do this anymore, but you also can. Depending on the show and depending how busy it is, there is usually 2 rows. I'm using Ka as the example here, which is the show at the MGM Grand. So this also goes for like the Bellagio. Any show that has a Cirque du Soleil show, I kind of know this. So there were 2 rows for any Cirque show that were reserved. They were always reserved. We could never purchase those tickets until usually about an hour or 2 before the show. And that is because those 2 rows, usually 3 rows, because they had like 3 different options. So they have 3 really good rows that those were specifically for hotel invited guests and casino marketing, or the casino host, essentially. For if somebody says, "Hey, like I want to go see the show with my family, can you get me tickets?" That is the allocation that they would go from, is using those. And if they knew that nobody was going to use those tickets or they didn't need them because it's closer to showtime, those are the ones that they would open up for us and we're able to purchase. And we would also call and be like, "Hey, like I have these 2 people that really want to sit in this seat. They'll pay the price." Because they're usually the more expensive tickets. They're like usually like $250 tickets, which is like top tier for a Cirque show. So if it's just like 2 of you, let's just say, you see the usher, and if you slip them like a 20, they'll say, "Okay, well, you guys stay here, and then if something opens up, I'll get a seat for you." This actually did happen for me at the Zumanity, but that was because the girl that I was dating knew the usher, so neither here nor there. Moving on. So what'll happen is this happened to me at the Baz Luhrmann show, which was really cool because we were seated in theater seats, and they moved us closer because they didn't want the theater to look empty. So they actually said, "Yeah, come this way," and then they move you to better seats, and then you got better seats for the show. I would say that you shouldn't, think that you're going to get anything out of it. This goes with anything for gratuity, that you're trying to get something for free, because those tickets are obviously more expensive. A good thing to do is to see if you're going to be able to do this is go on right before the show. So I would say 2 hours before the show starts. Just go ahead and look like you're going to buy tickets and look at the seat map. And again, this takes a lot more extra work than somebody would want to do, but hey, we're trying to get free stuff. So you go in the seat map, you look and see how busy it is. If there's a lot of seats available, especially ones that are better than yours, maybe try this trick out on any of the ushers. I would say try to find a cool usher, like somebody who looks like they're gonna vibe with you. Can't say if it's older or younger. Sometimes old people just know how it works. But try to find somebody who looks cool and sort of vibe, and go ahead and try this trick out. I wouldn't say it always works, but this is a good thing to do. It's also really good, especially if you have shows that are not as popular, that they might be able to seat you closer to the show, especially big theaters. Big theaters, it's going to help a lot. Okay, so let's get to some sort of misconceptions or ideas of Vegas that are true. So one of my favorites, which it works like a charm every single time, for the most part every single time, is saying that it is your birthday or anniversary whenever you make a reservation for a restaurant in Las Vegas. So some might say this doesn't always work, but it does. It actually works pretty well. You're usually able to get a nice dessert, or usually a nice dessert. Dessert's kind of the way that they go. But a lot of times they'll throw this at you for places like Delilah's for a long time. Not Delilah's, Mayfair Supper Club. We would put on your reservation, it's a birthday. And then they would just bring you a rose. It's if it's for a woman. And that was the free thing you got. And that absolutely sucked. That is the worst one. Because the reason you put it's your birthday is so you can get a free dessert out of it. So that is actually something that does actually happen quite a bit. And I do recommend doing it. If if you want to try getting something for free. But one that does work, and I've actually covered this on a different episode, is that when you first get there, this is sort of a baller move too. Like if you're on a date, like if you're a local and you go to the strip and you're like, I want to be a guy, and you go in, and this is I did this, and I think I've covered it as well. Is I was there before my date got there because we met there, but I tipped the hostess before she got there. I was like, oh, she's running a little bit late. She's going to be here like in 10, 15 minutes. Okay, just let me know. And I said, okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as I said that, I gave the hostess a 20. And with that, when the date got there, we were able to sit at a really nice table. So that was the first thing, is you kind of get like a nice table, which is nice because hostesses have the most power for somebody who gets paid the least in the entire restaurant, which is very interesting. It's such a fun ecosystem, the hostess position. But anyway, so we were able to sit there, and then we sat down, and then we were able to get a free dessert. And we also got a free appetizer, which was cool. So I was very excited about that. So they really took care of us for that, $20 investment, which was nice. But what I would recommend doing, if you're there with a significant other or whatever, you get walked to the table. If you really want a good seat, this is what I would say. So if you really want a good seat, like maybe close to the windows, and again, this is a whole different world that sort of we're living in, where essentially you can pay to be closer to a window or get a view or have a spending minimum, which sucks. But let's just say you go at like a restaurant that doesn't do these things. You walk in and you want a good table. When you walk in, you say, oh, it's reservations under Ortega. And they'll say, oh, right this way, Mr. Ortega. And then if you want, I would say right away, you say, oh, thank you so much, before they walk away from the counter. Because that's where the computer still is, and that's where all of the layout of the restaurant is. So I would give the 20 there and then walk to the seats, because from there you might get an actual better table. I've actually done this at a nightclub. I remember this now that I'm talking about it through. I was at, no longer around, they're going to rebrand it and stuff, Daylight, which is at nighttime, which is kind of funny. And it was like the first table I think I ever got. I think it was the second table I ever got. And yes, I paid for that one. That was stupid. So I was young. So anyways, I saved up and I did the whole thing. So then I get inside, and the guy who was walking us to the table, I was like, hey man, thank you, appreciate you. And I gave him, the handshake with the 20 inside. I think I might have gave him 40. I don't remember. Like it was 20 or 40. And then he grabbed his, oh, thanks, man. And then like we actually walked and we got the absolute best table in that price range. It was like a day bed because it was, outside. And it was the best day bed. They had like a really cool like dance floor and had a great view of the stage. So that was cool. So if anybody's coming to Vegas, any of my youngsters going to a nightclub, that's a little trick that might work. If you give them, inflation is different, so you might have to give them a hundo. It's hard. It's hard nowadays because a lot of the seats are, kind of sold already. But the tables and stuff is always like who comes in first or who they think is going to pay more. So that's sort of a situation that still is around today. But it's become very interesting now because you're able to book these things online. So sometimes you're able to like book the table before you get there. For like a good example is if you ever try to book a table or a seat at Stadium Swim or Circa Sportsbook, is you get to pick your actual table. So it doesn't quite work there, but you can always try. So another one that I like to recommend is for people who ask for their drink to be a double, are always funny to me because they always say, oh, I want more alcohol because I'm paying more money for it. Well, I guess that's cool, but you just have to pay more. My favorite trick for you to be able to get the most out of your drinking experience is like be cool with the bartender. Like just be nice. Just because it's also vibes. Like some bartenders are real assholes, but if you're able to be like, man, It's cool, man. Get to me when you get a chance. They love that shit. I know it's inconvenient, like for people for like my dad, not waiting for that, not waiting for anybody. But if you are cool enough and you're not like in a super rush to be like, yeah, man, I need it now, is to just be chill enough to be like, yeah, man, when you get a chance, like a raised hand, kind of an old school thing, but probably the best way of getting anybody's attention. You can't be quiet. I actually watched this the other day. I was sitting at a bar, and then like across the way, they were busy bar. And then across the way, they had this woman who was actually trying to get like some drinks for her friends, and was very demure, very quiet. It did take her a while to get a drink, which is very rare to be a woman and not be able to get a drink, but it happens because they're busy. But just like a raised hand, just like a, hey, I'm here, is a good way to get somebody's attention. Because we don't know. We're not, mind readers. So that's something to keep in mind when you're trying to get a drink. But, be cool. Don't be an asshole. That's always a nice like sort of plus. And bartenders can do a lot more than you think. Bartenders are kind of like the wise old people of the restaurant. They always have all the answers. They're really good listeners. They're usually a little bit more, I would say, mature than like the waiters and waitresses. Again, these are generalizations, but from my particular viewpoint, that's what I see. So bartenders you want to be friends with because they're the ones that hold the keys to the alcohol. That's very, very important. So this one's for my gamblers out there. So those of you who think you're good at gambling might say you don't want to play with beginners. And you might say, well, I'm going to go to a higher limit table. I'm going to go to a $15, $25 table. If you guys can spend $100 minimum, good for you, or $50. But let's just say, like, you think you're a high roller, so $15, $25 table. For me, it would be like going up to the $15 table. Going up to the $25 table would be like the bigger jump up. And a lot of people think like, oh, the people who spend more money know more about what they're doing when it comes to gambling. Quite a misconception. It just means that person has more money to spend and lose than someone who doesn't, obviously. I was at the Wynn one time, and I was watching a $50 craps game, which is quite expensive. If you're going to play a $50 craps game, you got to walk up with at least, $5 to $10 grand to be able to play like kind of normal. I would say $5 to $6 grand to be, playing normal in that game. But I was just watching it. I had a couple cocktails, and then there was this guy standing next to me who was with his girlfriend, and he said kind of out loud to her, I've never been able to understand this game. And I usually don't tell people like how to play or say that I've taught this game, but that day I was feeling particularly friendly, and I said, oh, well, this does this and this does that, and I was explaining the rules. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Like, oh, okay, I see. And it was kind of clicking for him, which was nice because I think he was a blackjack player and he wanted to learn a new game. And then the person crapped out, so everybody walked away from the table. So it was a $50 table and nobody was playing at it. And he looks at me and says, well, why don't you show me? And I was like, oh, we probably should go to the $25 table. He's like, oh, no, this is good. There's nobody here. So he walks up to the table and then boom, drops $3,000 on the table and was like, I'm going to learn how to play craps and this is how I'm going to do it. And I was like, let's do it. So I was just kind of standing there and we kind of went through all the basics, and you always kind of have to sort of take yourself back and be like, man, I can't believe like there's this much money in the world. But he put $50 on the pass line, which is like a normal bet. And then we threw the number was like 9 or something. And then they asked, there's a part in the game where you have to bet your odds, which those odds go behind the pass line. And it can usually be, however little you want, or how, there's a limit to how much it can be. But usually if you put $50 on the pass line, you want to put at least $50 on the odds, the behind it. And they said, what's your average bet in blackjack? He says, oh, $200. So they said, put $200 back there. So this guy was at $250 off of that first bet. And then he bet 3 numbers. So he's at $150. So now we're at, 250 plus 350. Mom, help me out with the math. That's 300, 350, $400. Is that right? Is that right? Did I get it right, Mom? On the first try? Yeah, Mom. I'm guys, it's so funny, guys. So my mom always lets me know that I do very bad math while I'm on the podcast. So whenever I do it, she's like, please don't try to do math. And then I do it. It's 400. I got it on the first try. Take that, everybody. So with that being the most embarrassing part of the podcast, so we had $400 on the table like before we even like threw the second round of dice. And the awesome part is that he actually won for like the first 5 minutes. So after that, because he was the only one playing, the dealers kind of took over. I said, all right, man, I got to go. You have a good night. And I left because everybody always wants the end of that story to be like, oh, like he tipped me like a bunch of money. No, because I was so worried that if he lost, he would get so pissed at me for losing that cash. So long story short, you can go to a high limit table and find a beginner anywhere you go in this town. So it's really up to you whether you want to stay at a table that maybe people don't know what they're doing, but just understand like if it's a $5, $10, or $15 table, that's sort of the unofficial beginner's table in Las Vegas, which that's really a note to everybody that if you are nervous about gambling in general, no one on the casino side is going to tell you, oh, you don't understand it, you shouldn't be playing this game. Because that's not what we do. The only way that you're going to learn the game is if by playing it. So we'll encourage that, and we'll also help as much as we can. Obviously, if it gets busy at a craps table, we're not going to be able to teach you the whole game. But at like blackjack tables, it's very easy for us to say, oh, the book says to hit, the book says to stay. And hopefully by the end, by 15 minutes in, 20 minutes in, you kind of figure it out. So don't be nervous. Like, don't think that people in Vegas all have it figured out on how to gamble. People always ask me, it's like, oh, you like know how to play this game, you know how to teach it, and blah, 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 blah. You must win. And I say, well, if I could win, then I probably wouldn't be teaching you guys how to play craps and blackjack. It's all about knowing just sort of like the flow of the game and how to do it to make it enjoyable. I always tell people to, there's certain ways to play the game, and I always tell people you're probably going to lose, but at least you want to look good doing it. But also that's another thing is like, don't be negative. Like, don't think, oh, we're going to lose all at some point. No, you're here to win. You're here to beat the casino back, and that's what you should be doing. Big deal. One more, I might have a couple more for you guys on the road. Most places do not have mini fridges. Like, let's just get that out of your mind right now. Be realistic. Like, everybody gets really pissed off. Although I did see that the remodel at MGM Grand does have mini fridges because that was like the number one thing everybody would, be pissed about. So they have a mini fridge and they also have a mini bar, which is quite nice. So yeah, that's quite cool. So that was an interesting episode. I think we covered some stuff that was good on there. Oh, I got one because this was one of like the main ones that I remembered. One of them being is people think like you can drink anywhere here, which is true. You can walk outside and drink wherever you want, except on Fremont Street. On Fremont Street, you do have to empty if it's in a glass, into a plastic cup because they do not allow glass on Fremont Street. So just keep that in mind that if you're on Fremont Street, make sure you put your drink into a plastic cup, which is at every entrance or exit from a hotel on Fremont. So that doesn't happen. So just keep that in mind. But on the Strip, you can walk around with glass, which they don't want you to. They don't want you to steal glasses. Although I do have a couple glasses in my pantry because some of them are really nice. Although there's one that I'm missing one that I was like my favorite cup, one of my favorite glasses to drink, tea out of, and I'm missing it. I got to go back and find it. But can you drink in a taxi or an Uber? Can you take your drink into a taxi or Uber? Yes, you can. So if you have a cocktail and you want to drink it, or a beer, most people take beer. They don't really take a glass. But let's just say that you have a bottle of beer in your hand and you end up getting into a taxi. That's actually legal. It's actually not bad because you are paying that person to drive you. So that person, it's their responsibility not to be drinking, obviously, because they're driving the cab or the taxi or the Uber. So you can take an alcoholic beverage into somebody else's car that is hired to drive you. You cannot take an alcoholic beverage in a friend's car that came to pick you up that was on the Strip. because they are not licensed, they don't have a CDL, to move passengers by the law. So just keep that in mind. I thought this was like self-explanatory, but then I saw an episode of Cops where somebody got caught doing this. So don't drink in your friend's car, even though you think you're doing the right thing by hiring a driver. So keep that in mind. So that's today's episode. Hopefully that was a little bit enlightening. Hopefully that, figured some stuff out. And not gonna lie, guys, this was a tough topic today because I really want to do, and I've really been circling this, and those of you who've been listening a long time, I really want to do like a series on Vegas, influential Vegas people like Steve Wynn, people like Jay Sarno, Willem Clark, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky. More history stuff about Vegas because I think it's very interesting. And I think I've done a lot of like recommendation episodes, which, are fun, but then it kind of feels like I'm saying the same things over and over again. So I want to do more of those because I think Vegas history is very fun. And I actually love history. And I used to be a tour guide a long, long time ago. And I thought that was like the most fun thing in the world because I didn't know how much zero responsibility I had once I got off of the bus. But yeah, so let me know if you guys want to hear more of that. I can still do it because I want to do it myself. But Steve Wynn's been like on Instagram, just like dropping nuggets of how Vegas was good back in the day. And there's going to be a whole thing in the podcast where I have to tell you that, yeah, Steve Wynn was, under investigation for like sexual harassment, like from the like 70s. And then this person came forward like during the Me Too movement. And then nothing ended up happening out of all of that after him losing his hotel and, not being on the board anymore, basically leaving Las Vegas. And I don't know. I'm kind of sad about it just because, it's tough for the lady that it happened to back in those days, which I don't know. It's a very convoluted like court case if you ever go back and read it. But such an important figure in Las Vegas history and the way that we build new hotels. And he's sort of the people like him, not the bad parts, obviously, but people who build hotels and who are hoteliers like at heart and really thought of it as like, a hospitality business are really missing in the city right now. So I really want to sort of go back to the basics of why I think that was important. So we'll be doing that at some point. Really hope so. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you guys check out, we're posting back on again. So Conscious Confidential _LV on Instagram and then at Keys to Vegas on TikTok if you want to see our latest video. So hopefully you guys stick around. I'll see you guys next week. But if you see me out in town, come up and say hello. But remember, keep it confidential.